Hey guys, and welcome to another painting tutorial. So today I'm going to be doing part 1 of how I went about painting Jain Zar. Now, for this model, I don't know, I'm not really sure if I want to include her in my army, but it was just such a beautiful model I wanted to go ahead and paint it. So for part 1 today, I'm going to be focusing on the plume, or hair to put it more simply. So just to start out with, I'm just going to get a few things together and we'll get started. So for this first step, I'm just going to be using corn red as the base coat, and you'll want to do 2 thin coats of this. So just start by putting some down there, just on your paint palette, and add a reasonable amount of water to it. Just want to get that zoom right so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. And just go ahead and start applying that, and just be careful not to hit the rest of the model. I mean, it's not a big deal if you do, but just it's kind of good practice to just try not to. And you can see there now that the corn red application is complete. So now we're going to move on to Caribird Crimson. And you're going to want to aim to shade just all over everywhere that we did the corn red. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water to this as well. And as you would have heard many times before in many other videos, just always make sure you don't let your shades pool. So just apply it as neatly as you can, and just continue this process all around. And after having given the Caribird Crimson enough time to dry, I'm now going to move back to corn red, but this time we're going to be using a small dry brush. So just get a little bit on your palette there. I always tend to use a different brush as well when I'm actually putting the paint on the palette. For example, just a large brush just in general. And then just going to grab that small dry brush. And just using some paper towel off to the side, just going to get most of that off of the brush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and apply this to the entirety of the plume. And now that the corn red is dry, I'm going to be moving on to Wazdaka red, or Wazdaka red. Still not really sure on the pronunciation on that one, but you guys know the one I'm talking about, obviously. So once again, just going to be using a small dry brush for this part, and again, just a small amount on the brush. Wipe it off on some paper towel, or just a cloth, whatever you decide to use. Now with this step, I'm not going to be aiming to do it over the entirety of the plume. I'm just going to be focusing on some raised areas. For example, the hair behind the body. I want to leave some of that dark in there. and just some of those more shadowed sort of areas. Now that the Wazdaka Red is dry, going to be moving on to Wild Rider Red for this next step, and once again just using a small dry brush, but this time just making sure that you leave some of that Wazdaka Red visible, so even less on the brush this time. You can always go back and get more paint, of course, if need be, but you just really want to be focusing on the front areas of the plume here, so just at the top, around the top, and just any areas that you see where the light will catch. And now that that step's complete, going to be sticking with Wild Rider Red, but this time we're going to have it watered down and we're going to use a detail brush. Now, you can use a small layer brush or just any brush that gets a fine enough point, just so that we can get this detail in nice and clean. Now you don't want to do every strand. I mean, well, you can, it's entirely up to you. But for this, I'm just going to be doing some at the front of the plume here and just in some areas at the bottom as well, just to really bring out the other reds that we've put in there. And now once again with Wild Rider Red, just going to be using a small dry brush for this and just going to be working over the areas that we've just done, that we've just highlighted previously with Wild Rider Red. And this is just, the reason I keep using the dry brush is just because I wanted to give an organic feel to the plume. So just go ahead and lightly apply that, just ensuring that you don't have a lot on the brush at all. And you can see now that all of the colors are really coming together, and a lot of the previous highlights still very much visible there. So now I'm going to be moving on to a rough 50-50 mix of Fire Dragon Bright and Wild Rider Red. Now, you don't have to be absolutely precise with the mix. As you can see here, I'm kind of just going for it. So just get a good mix there. Just make sure you add enough water. And now using a detail brush, just going to be focusing on, once again, just some of the strands of the hair there, particularly around the front near the mask. So with just a minimal amount of paint on the brush, and just as neatly and carefully as you can, just start applying that toward the ends of the strands. And just being quite selective with them. Now for this next step, just going to follow the same process, but this time just using Fire Dragon Bright on its own. Just making sure you get a good mix there with your color and water. And at this point I was actually pretty happy with how it was looking, but I wanted to just take it one step further and do a 50-50 mix highlight of Fire Dragon Bright and Phalanx Yellow. You don't have to do this step, but I just like to, I'm actually a big fan of doing a lot of highlights, so I just decided, as I said, just to take it a little bit further. So just apply those colors to your palette, just keep them separately, and then just do a mix to the point of a color of which you're happy with, just as a final touch to the highlight. Alright guys, and that is going to be the end of part 1 for how to paint Jain Zar. Thanks so much for watching today. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in part 2. Thanks guys.